Hi, I'm Tom Ruller. I'm the director of the New York State Archives, located in Albany, New York. The New York State Archives preserves and makes available the official records of New York's colonies and states. Our records date back to the 1630s, the period when New York was governed by the Dutch. Our records are very strong in the era prior to the Revolutionary War and especially after the Revolutionary War. The New York State Archives holds 26 miles of government records. All of these records are preserved and made available for individuals to use, to research, to learn from. I want to talk to you a little bit today about how to discover what's happening here at the New York State Archives. I've got a couple of slides I'd like to share with you, which hopefully will tell you a bit about the New York State Archives. Here at the State Archives, we are located on the 11th floor of the Cultural Education Center here in Albany, New York. The Cultural Education Center also houses the New York State Museum and the New York State Library. The State Library has an incredibly strong genealogical resource collection, including many published family genealogies, name indexes, and other resources. Again, at the State Archives, we protect and preserve an abundance of material that is of interest not just to genealogists, but to all kinds of researchers. Some of those records are foundational materials, such as the original 1777 Constitution that established the state of New York. This document, written largely by John Jay, was ratified in 1777 at the height of the Revolutionary War, prior to the Battle of Saratoga, which occurred just north of us here in Albany. This is the kind of foundational material that any state government archival repository holds. It ensures that there is some continuity and definition to the governments that we currently live under. As I mentioned earlier, we do contain all of the records from the Dutch administration of the New Netherland colony, such as this beautiful deed, which was signed by Peter Stuyvesant. Many of the records that we have are connected both to the Dutch period, but also to the deeds and land transfer records that the state governed prior to the Revolutionary War and to some extent after the Revolutionary War. Deeds, letters patent, and other records about transfer and ownership of land are a very, very rich resource for genealogists. Most of these resources in New York have been rigorously and thoroughly indexed by name and by location. Land records are very, very strong here in our collections, and we make them available. Many of these records have been digitized, such as this beautiful deed, and are available on our website. I'll talk more about that later. Again, we're a government repository, so we collect and maintain and preserve the records of the major government projects, such as the construction of New York's Erie Canal. We call the Erie Canal New York's gift to the nation, because it was responsible for opening up the West to civilization. It rapidly increased the ability to commercialize land and to transport goods and services and most importantly, people from one part of the country to another. This is a photograph of construction workers when they enlarged the canal in 1917 and 1918. But we hold the records of the original construction of the canals dating to 1817. Which includes a lot of very, very interesting material about the workers who worked on the canal, their names, their rates of pay, what they did, and where they lived. It's a wonderful resource, very difficult to access and use because it's not well indexed, but it's a great resource, and it's again a great example of the intersection between major government public works projects and information about people. I mentioned the canal. There's a lot of great information about the context of the construction and management and eventual enlargement of the canal, which helps provide context for the stories of the people around the canal and around any major government project. This is a great example of a broadside of individuals who did not want us to construct or enlarge the Great Erie Canal. It's a wonderful story about the people that made our country great and the people who tried to say different things about how we made things happen and the role of government in making those things happen. One of the most important collections of records here at the State Archives in New York and in many archives and government archives across the country are records of the courts. One unique thing that government does is jurisprudence. Here at the New York State Archives, we have over 2,000 boxes of records. So 2,000 cubic feet, I'm sorry, not 2,000, 7,000 cubic feet of records of New York statewide courts. These include courts dating from 1690 all the way up to 1847. These wonderful court records document estate settlement, they document the transfer of land, they document the fights between one individual or another over some grievance. Here's a great example on my slide here of a document signed by Robert Fulton. We all know Robert Fulton, the great inventor of the steamboat. He was also a business person. Fulton was involved in a lawsuit about challenging his monopoly of the steamboat business going up and down the Hudson River. These are court documents that talk about not just Fulton's business, but his business partners, who was involved, and what the ultimate decision regarding that monopoly was. Great collections of records. Again, over 7,000 boxes of material from 1690 to 1847, with tremendous amounts of names, facts, places, people, etc. The State Archives, like most repositories across the country, and really across the world, are undergoing some significant change during this pandemic period. Our current status here at the State Archives is that our research room, which is open typically from Monday through Saturday from 9:30 in the morning till 5 at night, is currently closed to researchers. We've been closed since last March. We don't have an anticipated date when we'll be able to reopen. We are closed to researchers now, but our online systems are fully functional and available. Those online systems contain access to all of the records that we hold here at the State Archives. Not all the records are digitized, of course. In fact, a very small percentage of them are. But information about what those records contain and how to access them is available through our online resource. We offer telephone and electronic mail reference services Monday through Friday, 9:30 in the morning to 5 p.m. You can find that information on how to contact us via electronic mail on our website. We've also been meeting many researchers who need copies and access to materials through scanning and photocopying. Typically, we do a few thousand scans or photocopies in any given month. During this period of the pandemic, and while we've been closed physically to researchers, we've been scanning and mailing out and making available over 10,000 pieces of documents each month. It's an incredible way of delivering content to people across the country, indeed across the globe, because we recognize the records that we have are essential for the kinds of research that people need to do. So again, we're continuing to scan on demand almost and make information available. But how do you find out what's here at the State Archives? Like most of other state archives across the country, we have an online resource that helps you discover what's in the archives. This is our website, our homepage, www.archives.nysed.gov. And I've highlighted two areas that I want to talk a little bit more about. First, our section on research. How do you find records in the archives? How do you access those materials? What are the costs for duplication, etc.? We'll talk a little bit more about that. And second, I'll talk a little bit about our digital collections, where we've scanned over 100,000 items and made them available for you to download and interact with and use in your research. The one area that I haven't highlighted, which I will talk a little bit about, is our relationship with ancestry.com, where we've supplied literally millions of documents, which are all indexed and available through ancestry.com from the collections at the State Archives. But let's talk a little bit more about this research area first. So if you go to our research section of our website and you want to search for records, there are a number of areas that you can use. Research topics, where we've tried to identify a few very popular topics for you to learn from: military records, census records, court records, genealogical materials of special interest to genealogists. One of the most important areas here are the finding aids, the next item down on this list. Finding aids are the way archivists describe records so that you can find what's in them and understand where they came from, understand their context, and understand their content. Context is critically important in using any archival material. Why were these records created? What should they be used for? And what kind of information do they contain? We also maintain an online catalog, very similar to a library catalog, where we provide basic bibliographic information about the records in our holdings. I mentioned our digital collections. Also important is our name index. We do not have a comprehensive name index of every name that appears in the records at the State Archives, but we do have many, many thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of records with individual names that you can search on, and it'll bring you right to the information and where those names appear within our records. One of the unique things in the State Archives collection, because it's a government repository, we collect the records of government, is our Motion Picture Division Index. New York State operated a censoring operation from the 1920s until the 1960s, where every motion picture film script, every motion picture film that was shown in New York needed to be licensed and reviewed before it was licensed. Fortunately for us, the folks that did that work from the 1920s to the 1960s kept all of the scripts that were submitted for review by the New York State censors. So we have a comprehensive collection of nearly 60,000 motion picture film scripts, many in foreign languages. Many, the only copy exists here at the State Archives. It's a great resource if you're interested in film history. And then finally, we provide a little information on our new accessions, new transfers of records that have just come into the archives. Again, everything that comes into the archives and that's maintained and made available by us is described. We have some minimal level of control and some minimal level of information available for you to understand what we have here. There is no backlog here at the State Archives. There are records that are not as well described as we'd like to, but everything we have, you can find. I want to drill down a little bit about these finding aids. As I mentioned, this is how archivists describe the records that are in our collections. We provide some important and critical context. That's that administrative history. Where do these records come from and why were they created? And to help you understand what you might be able to discover within these records. In this case, I'm showing you a little bit about a set of records that don't have a lot of genealogical information, but they're a really, really important resource for understanding the management of wildlife here in New York. If you look at the dates of these records from 1918 to the year 2000, these are wildlife management reports. So the information on the appearance and abundance of wildlife across the state for nearly 100 years. Great resource if you want to understand important information about the natural environment here in New York. That administrative history provides you with the basic information on why the state did this work. And then the scope and content note. That's where you'll find what's in these records at a high level, generally. It doesn't provide specific information about what's in each folder or what's in each document, but it does provide some specific information on the information content of the records themselves. But we do, in many cases, provide detailed information about what's in each folder. Here is a box and folder list for each of the records here, for each of the folders and boxes in this collection of records. So while this record series may not necessarily talk about names, if you're interested in specific species, for example, muskrats or bobcats, or understanding fur trapping in New York for a very long period of time, this is where you'll find much of that information. Many of our records, in fact, a majority of our records, have some degree of box and folder listing, container lists that tell you what's in each box and folder. If you put together the scope and content note of a set of records, the box and folder listing or the container list, and our name index, you have incredibly powerful access tools that'll help you get to a specific individual in a particular box or folder in a collection of records. And it will help you understand what the context of that is. I mentioned our digital collections. This is a select group of records, mostly of photographs, but of many documents that are fully accessible and downloadable via our website. I mentioned the digital collections a little while ago. The digital collections is fully searchable. It contains about 100,000, maybe 150,000 items. Again, we have 26 miles of records, 260 million documents in the archives. So you can understand this is a very small subset of materials, but it's a great resource to find specific information. One of the collections in our digital collections is all of the records from the Dutch administration of the New Netherland colony. 14,000 documents, fully described, completely indexed, of all of the information generated by the government of New Netherland, all available for review and download. Many of those records have been translated from the original Dutch into English. That information is also searchable. I mentioned our ancestry.com resource. We have supplied probably 100 different groups of records. This is a small set of the lists of records that we have provided to Ancestry, which have been fully indexed. Military records are especially prominent here, as are some of the New York State Census records from the early 19th century. I'm sorry, the early 20th century. Many records of inmates in New York State prisons are also included here. You'll see a great amount of resources available from the New York State Archives through Ancestry.com. And again, all of them fully indexed. I'm running out of time, so I just want to give you a couple of things to think about in terms of staying in touch with us here at the archives. First, we have a mailing list. We have a great monthly newsletter, which gives you information on new accessions, updates on what's happening here at the archives, new programs and new resources, easy to sign up on. Go to our Contact Us section of our website and fill out the information, select the newsletter, and you're ready to go. You can also learn a lot about what we do and how to access our resources via our YouTube channel. We've got a few videos on what happens when you come to the archives when we are finally open to the public and have the research room open again. You can learn how to use our Ancestry.com resource, and you can learn how to use our online resources. It'll give you a step-by-step process for how to discover what's in a finding aid and how to use it. YouTube's a great resource, and we're really happy to provide these instructional materials to help you get the most out of the New York State Archives collections. We also publish a quarterly magazine that really tells a lot about the stories of people here in New York. It's a great resource to learn about the history of the state, but also about the people that made the state great. New York Archives Magazine. It's published quarterly, easy to subscribe via our website. I think you'll really enjoy it. And you'll learn a lot about what happens here in New York and why New York is the place that it is. So call us, write us, and someday we hope you'll visit us. The New York State Archives. We're located on the 11th floor of the Cultural Education Center here in Albany, New York. You can send us an inquiry via arcref@nicid.gov, that address right there on the screen, or give us a call Monday through Friday, 9:30 in the morning to 5 o'clock at night. We'll answer the phone. We're looking forward to talking to you. Again, we're really happy and excited about the opportunity to share a little bit about the New York State Archives with all of you. We wish you well, and we hope to hear from you very soon.